Thank you for checking out this great webinar on Brightline. We had a really fantastic show that was very well attended, and I'm glad that you want to take a look. But first, we want to thank our sponsors, Siemens Mobility, the maker of the really great trains that are operating on Brightline in Florida today, and also out of Chicago in the Midwest. Again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to more shows like this in the future. Hello, thank you for joining. I'm Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. Currently in Chicago. This morning, I was in Moline, wishing that I had a fast train on a frequent schedule in order to get me from there to here very quickly, but we are working on it. So for those who don't know of us or are new to the conversation, we are a nonprofit advocacy organization. We help, engage people like yourselves and local leaders and state legislators understand the what of fast, frequent, and affordable trains, the why we need to do it, and the how it can happen. What steps can we take over step by step to make it happen? We believe in the integrated network approach, in which high-speed trains are probably about 20% of the network. Regional trains, which are operating frequently on memory schedules or schedules that occur on, like the 12-minute after the hour mark. Regional trains and interregional trains, which connect the entire country, and intercity buses all work together in an integrated way in order to connect entire regions to each other, so that we can see each other more often face to face, creating better business ties, stronger family connections, and more economic opportunities spread across the regions instead of concentrated in specific areas. Really excited. If, as a quick aside, if you are new to the organization, our website is highspeedrail.us. You can take action there through signing a petition or another action. You can just sign up for our newsletter. Or more importantly, if you like programs like this, whether you're a member or not, please go up to the upper right-hand corner and hit donate. We're really excited about providing programs like this, and you can help make sure that they continue on a regular basis by being a donor. Really excited about our speaker today, Ben Porritt from Brightline. Brightline's been very aggressive and very innovative in bringing high quality frequent service to North America. They've got two very exciting projects underway. And if there's one takeaway that I want folks who are promoting rail service around the country to take, is they launched with frequent service, not one or two trains a day, but frequent service. So if you're going to make the investment in the infrastructure, you really need to make it useful for people throughout the day. But there's a lot more that they've done that's very exciting. And I'll give in just a second, we'll get started, but a little bit of housekeeping. If you've got questions, please use the questions and answers. Chris Ott up in Madison will ask those questions to Ben. And feel free to use the chat, but really the question and answer is where if you've got a question, we'll have questions in about 15 or 20 minutes. So Ben, thank you very much for joining us today, and take it away.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks, Chris. See a lot of familiar names on the chat. So to those I know, hello, and to those I haven't met yet, I appreciate you having us here. And I'm going to pull up my presentation. I look forward to talking about Brightline and high-speed rail in general. I assume everybody can see that. Can you see that, Rick?
Absolutely.
Awesome. I like to start every presentation with talking a little bit about what's important to us from a company standpoint. And it's not just high-speed rail and making sure systems are built across the country, but also safety. If you haven't taken our safety pledge, go to brightlinesafety.com. We're trying to get 50,000 signatures before we open in Orlando later this summer. And, we're hovering just below 10,000. So take a minute and go through that. It's quick. But, Brightline, for those who haven't heard of us, today will be a great opportunity for me to introduce you to the concept and the company. And for those who are familiar with what we're doing, it may be an update on all the progression and the progress that we've made, both in Florida and then out west between Las Vegas and Southern California. Yesterday, we had a huge news day, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. We unveiled our brand new Orlando station for our Florida system. It was an incredible day. We're not going to open service until this summer, but we unveiled the completion of the construction at the station in the Orlando International Airport. I want to show you what that looks like, and I'll show you just a quick video that hopefully will pump you up. The pictures in the video don't do it justice. It is an incredible accomplishment. And yesterday was an emotional day for a lot of us who were there, because it's 10 years of hard work that has taken us to this point. This was an event that I was kind of blown away by the response that we got from the community. We had more than 350 attendees. I had a number of speakers, including the local mayors and the Orlando Airport CEO, Kevin Tebow. Some of the other things that I just found phenomenal was we had more than 82 members of the media on site to cover that event yesterday. So there's a ton of attraction and interest in what we're doing. And not just 82 members of the media, we had 13 hours of live television coverage coming from the station starting at about 5 a.m. Big announcements that we made, other than just unveiling the station, is that tickets for Brightline Orlando are going to go on sale next month. With tickets starting at $79. For a family of 4, it'll be less than $199. And we announced bits and pieces of our schedule. Non-stop trains will take 2 hours and 59 minutes between the two cities, which is 235 miles. And then we'll have more regular trains that stop at our entire system, which will take about 3 hours and 25 minutes. So a lot of news that came out of yesterday, a big, exciting event, and just a great opportunity for us to kind of showcase our progress. For those who aren't familiar with who we are, Brightline is the first private company to engage in passenger rail in the United States in more than a century. The last person who did it was a guy by the name of Henry Flagler, who built not just the Florida East Coast Railroad, but frankly, he built the state of Florida and the population centers that we all know today and where we stop. And this is our business. We want to connect city pairs that are too short to fly and too far to drive. Our first concept was Miami to Orlando. And then in 2019, we acquired Brightline West, which will connect Las Vegas to Southern California. That's a 218-mile system. I'll tell you more about that just as we go through the presentation. But I think the big news with that is we will break ground this year in the second half of 2023. Where we are today is we're operational from Miami to West Palm Beach, which is about 70 miles. And at the end of last year, we opened 2 new stations, Aventura and Boca Raton. And so South Florida has 5 stations from Miami to West Palm. It represents a total of a $6 billion investment. It's about $4.7 billion in infrastructure costs. But when you add up all of the private financing adjustments, you're closer to $6 billion. We're more than 90% complete, and we'll get into the job numbers, but we've had for the last 3 years, just about 1,000 people on the project. And we all know this from talking about the size of investment, but these projects are hard to find any comparison to the economic impact and the job creation that you see. The next logical frontier in the state of Florida, after we get to Orlando this summer, is Tampa. We're in discussions, and we have the right of way, which is the I-4. And then there is a larger conversation taking place with Florida Department of Transportation and local stakeholders around Orlando for how best we get from the airport to the I-4. And they have a vision of expanding their local commuter rail, Sunrail, to combine with our system to add stations to the airport, Orlando Convention Center, and then what they call South I Drive, which will service all of the Orlando attractions and theme parks. That'll include about 90 miles of additional infrastructure. And so we're waiting for some of the local decisions to be made, but we're on pace and we're building out and designing what I-4 would look like with intercity passenger rail. Other thing that sets us apart is this is not your grandfather's train. This is not Henry Flagler's train. And we measure ourselves by different standards, not just ridership. We had close to 2 million people in 2022. And since December through March, we had 4 straight record months of ridership. Just to give you a sense of how it's growing, in March of this year, we had 180,000 passengers. And in March of last year, we had just over 70,000 passengers. So we've increased that significantly. And one of the ways that we think that we do that is we think that the experience matters. The ride is a big part of train travel. And so we measure ourselves by what they call NPS score, Net Promoter Score, which is how most companies, hotels, consumer brands measure themselves, which is, would somebody recommend you to somebody else? Would you recommend Brightline to a friend or a relative? And what that score does is it goes from negative 100 to positive 100. And frankly, 0 is a good score. Brightline's is hovering around 75 today. And if you look at this slide here, you'll see that our comparison from an experience standpoint ranks up with a lot of the brands that we all engage with and we admire to be, from JetBlue and Amazon and Netflix and Apple. That's where Brightline finds itself. So it's bigger than just getting people from city to city. It's doing it in a way that they really, love the experience. It's also a big reason why we're the fastest recovering system in the country post-COVID. People know and trust our touchless environments inside our station. We have touchless marketplaces, touchless turnstiles, touchless hygiene on board and in our stations. And so all of these things match up to the, today's preferences from a consumer standpoint. This is a little bit about what it looks like. And if you haven't experienced our train, I'd certainly invite you to do that. It's just an incredible ride. Going back to the economic impact that this project has provided, like I said, it's about a $5+ billion investment. And we've generated more than $6.4 billion into the state of Florida. $3.5 billion directly into the GDP and $2.4 billion into labor income. We've created over 10,000 jobs over the past 8 years of construction. And we did that in 2 phases. We first launched Brightline, prototype 1, which was Miami to Orlando. And then we started construction between Orlando and West Palm Beach in 2019. And those projects combined is what represents the 10,000 jobs. Once the system is finalized and up and running, we'll have more than 2,000 jobs that run the system and that operate and maintain the train. In fact, right now we're hiring just about 150 jobs in Orlando, all at a minimum of $20 an hour, ranging up to six figures, depending upon the project and the role. And then the second thing is that the environmental benefits of these projects are equally beneficial to the economic impact. And, you know, we're going to take 3 million cars off our roadways. So not only is it better for the environment, it's safer. We're saving lives. And then you'll remove carbon emissions from the air. One thing I don't have on this slide is we built our trains in Florida in a partnership with Siemens Mobility. They manufactured those trains in Sacramento, California. And that supply chain didn't really exist until we started buying these trains and manufacturing these trains in partnership with Siemens. And today they have built, and we have built together, a manufacturing base across this country that now includes 160 different suppliers in 27 states for the train systems and the rolling stock that we've built here in Florida. We're making history every day. We have a number of different milestones that we're working on. Last month, we unveiled our 62-acre vehicle maintenance facility in Orlando, just off the airport property, that we call Base Camp, which is where the expedition and the journey of every train will start as it travels between Orlando and South Florida. That facility, you know, 5-6 years ago was a swamp, and we were literally chasing alligators and draining water in order to build the facility that we have today. It is now easily recognized as one of the best train facilities in the entire world. The next step after unveiling our station yesterday is we also announced that construction on that project will be substantially complete at the end of May. And then we'll go into a rigorous testing and certification process with the FRA that will take us somewhere into July. And then shortly after that, this summer, we'll open the full system. But like I said, we're making history every day. One of the bits of history that we made back in February was we began testing trains between Orlando International Airport and Cocoa Beach, which is alongside the 528 roadway at 130 miles an hour. And that makes that the fastest train outside the Northeast Corridor in the United States. So if you don't know what that sounds like or looks like, let me show you. Love that video, by the way. As well as, you know, the train testing, you know, we've done a significant amount of construction and improvements to the system. There's about 155 railroad crossings between West Palm Beach and Orlando. We've upgraded those. We've double tracked parts of the system. We've improved every one of those railroad crossings to essentially seal the corridor. We have 3 different speeds that the system in Florida will operate. In South Florida today, we operate at 79 miles an hour. The boldest, most impressive construction projects in the country, and certainly one of the largest private construction in the country. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Brightline West. This is our second project If Brightline, Florida is the prototype to show that Americans are ready to get out of their car, we think that Brightline West is the blueprint for how to build high-speed rail in America. And the system is impressive. We acquired Brightline West in 2019. It was a late-stage development project that had been discussed for about 15 years called Express West. And the value of that acquisition was that they had a 2011 environmental permit from Victorville to Las Vegas. We've taken the last 3 years and expanded that much closer to Los Angeles into Rancho Cucamonga. The total system starts in Las Vegas to Victorville and Apple Valley, where we'll have a station, Hesperia, where there'll be a local commuter service, and then Rancho Cucamonga, where our station will share a facility with California Metrolink. That's 218 miles. This will be the first true high-speed rail station system in America with top speeds of at least 186 miles an hour. And we think with 50 million trips between these two destinations every year, 85% of which are by car, we will be able to extract 11 million trips, one-way trips each year. One of the things that I think has made this system possible is that we are building 96% of it right down the middle of the I-15 highway. We have no eminent domain issues, no private property issues, and no grade crossings. That's what we have to do in America if we really want to build a high-speed network across the country. It's already environmentally impacted. There's been cars that have been traveling that route for 70 years plus. And so it allows us to leverage the best highway system in the world and add value to it by creating high-speed rail. Again, just to show you some of the benefits of this project similar to what you see in Florida, I think the best way to describe it is that it's going to be green and safe. We'll take millions of cars off the road. We're going to save hundreds of lives. But we've also looked at it from an environmental standpoint. We're going to remove more than 400,000 plus emissions from the air. It's going to be fully electric, zero emission trains. We're going to build 3 new substations to serve the system exclusively. And the majority of the energy that we have will be from renewable resources, wind, solar, and others. It's a $10.5 billion infrastructure project. It's a $12 billion total investment with the financing costs. That will be predominantly privately funded. It'll create more than 35,000 construction jobs, leaving 1,000 permanent jobs left to run the system. $10 billion in economic impact. We've recently announced two memorandums of understanding, or 2 agreements with different unions. The first is what they call the High-Speed Rail Labor Coalition, which is combined of 13 labor unions that will maintain and operate the system once complete. And then we signed an agreement with California and Southern Nevada building trades to help us mobilize a workforce for development. Those are in progress now. So this system will be American made, American built, and it's going to be incredible. Just a little bit more about what the stations look like. Rancho Cucamonga on the bottom left, you'll see the California Metrolink trains at the bottom and our trains at the top. You'll be able to get to downtown Union Station in Los Angeles in an additional 40 minutes. But we thought that it was important to partner with a first last mile provider so that our guests coming in from Las Vegas have more reach and access depending upon where they're coming from the Los Angeles area. And anybody who lives in Southern California knows there's no true downtown of LA. It's spread out throughout the region and really includes everything from Pasadena down to Anaheim. I mean, it's just a big sprawling region, and we think that we have the best spot to serve all of that. We'll have 2 inline stations, one in Victor Valley, which is on the Apple Valley side of the I-15. We own 300 acres of property. There we'll put both a maintenance of way facility as well as the station. And then the Hesperia system that we're contemplating is in partnership with San Bernardino County Transit Authority. They want to run 3 or 4 trains in the morning and 3 or 4 trains in the afternoon to service commuters trying to get down the Cajon Pass into the LA region. Why we think that we can break ground this year. I think this is the most important thing. Not only is this a blueprint for how to build high-speed rail in America, but the reason that we think that we can break ground this year is there's 3 things that you have to have in order to put a shovel in the ground. The first is acquisition of your land and your rights of way. We own 110 acres of land that we acquired about a mile south of the Las Vegas Strip. It's on Las Vegas Boulevard. It's about 10 minutes from the airport. It's 2 minutes from the Las Vegas Raiders facility. And there's plenty of room for additional transit-oriented development. We only need about 30% of that to build our station. And then there's other developments already being planned across the street and across the way. So this is likely to become the new entry point for Las Vegas for visitors and travelers alike. We own that land today. We own the 300 acres of land in Victor Valley. We own the property in Rancho Cucamonga. And then we have an agreement with San Bernardino County Transit Authority for the Hesperia station that they're envisioning. Second, we have rights of way agreement with Nevada Department of Transportation and Caltrans for access to the I-15. That section of the corridor would have never been used for anything. So now both of those states will generate revenue off of our lease. And as part of the $12 billion project costs, we're going to improve the I-15 highway with about $800 million of investment. That's dollars that the state would have otherwise had to pay themselves. And that's an added benefit that they get. So you got to have access to your land and rights of way. We've secured those. Permits. Last year in October, the Federal Railroad Administration, who oversaw our permitting process, posted publicly our draft environmental permit. That necessitated a 30-day public comment review. There were no negative comments. Those were only positive comments. And the main headline from the permitting process is that because we're building within an existing transportation corridor, there are no material environmental impacts to the area in the region. Those permits are being made final now. They will be completely finalized before the month of July, which means we are done with that. And then construction readiness. We've done all of our design and engineering needed to put a shovel in the ground. Some of that stuff never ends, but for the most part, we're done. And then, like I said, we have the agreements with the California and Nevada state building trades that are going to help us mobilize a workforce for development. One piece of news on this today is that today, officially, we in partnership with the Nevada Department of Transportation have submitted a federal state partnership grant, which is part of the infrastructure bill, the Biden infrastructure bill, for $3.75 billion that will help jumpstart the financing for this project. So $12 billion cost, 3.75 of that we are hopeful will come from the federal state partnership grant program. That is an incredibly important program for high-speed rail development in the country. That is going to be not only what jumpstarts Brightline West, but with this being the blueprint for how you build across the rest of the country, that's why that program is so important. And those dollars will be awarded before the end of the year, and we'll begin the rest of the financing for the project in advance of that. We'll finance the rest of the system exactly how we financed the system in Florida, which was a $6 billion project. And we'll do that through a combination of private equity and debt. One of the mechanisms that we use is private activity bonds. Private activity bonds are not backed by a government body at the federal, state, or local level. They're backed by the assets of the project and sold to private investors and large banking institutions. We're the largest users of those in the country. We've sold more than 4 billion of those in the state of Florida to help finance Florida. And then the remaining part of the project will be done through private equity means. So let me end there. I'm happy to take questions. And Rick, I don't know if I missed anything major, but those are the high points.
Great. Thank you. I don't know, Rick, if you want to comment, but we've got plenty of questions. Yeah, as many or more questions than I've ever seen. So your presentation has gone over well, Ben, I think it's fair to say. And before we get to questions, I wanted to share a few comments that I picked out of the Q&A, and thank you for everybody, or to everybody, for putting your comments and questions in. Carl says, I have to travel to Miami every few months, and before Brightline, I dreaded that drive. And then Beth Colson, a member of our board of directors, actually says that we didn't have to rent a car in February because we took Brightline up and down the corridor and got to the airport by the Brightline shuttle. Fabulous service and ride.
Love it.
So people like what you're serving up. We've got lots of questions about where, when will the service be extended? When will it start? I'm only going to go for a few of those right now. John asks, when Brightline starts Tampa service, will they use Tampa Union Station?
So we're pretty close to locking down our land acquisition in the Tampa region. Haven't announced that yet. I do think what's important to us as it relates to our stations is that it has direct access to other first and last mile options. And so that's what you see with Rancho Cucamonga and California Metrolink. If you've been to our Miami station, we have Brightline plus 3 other forms of rail that come into that station or will come into that station. The Miami Metro Mover, the Miami-Dade Metro Rail, and then at the beginning of next year, we're supposed to see the Tri-Rail system come into that station. So when we look at where our stations are going to be, a big primary driving factor is what other forms of transportation can we connect in there, because that's going to make it easier for everybody to get access to the station.
Okay, thanks. Donald asks, when can I expect service at the Lakeland, Florida station?
Lakeland is part of the unsolicited proposal that we submitted for access to the I-4 and to get between Orlando and Tampa. So the way that we did it in South Florida and the way that we're going to do it when we connect to Orlando, and then the way that we'll do it when we connect to Tampa, is we got to get the main system up and running first, and then we'll begin to look at additional stations after that. But Lakeland is definitely contemplated and a part of that system. We still got some things to figure out in Tampa, like I said earlier, with the local decisions that need to be made that will help drive the timeline for getting to Tampa in general.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And we also have more questions about service to other parts of Florida. Is it likely that Brightline will extend to Daytona, St. Augustine, Jacksonville, the Treasure Coast? Maybe we should sort of batch these together and
Sure.
could you speak more about your possible expansion in Florida?
Yep. So got to get to Orlando. That's top priority. No question about it. Once we turn that system on and understand all the ways in which the demand from our passengers works, we're going to start to look at others. We've always contemplated a Space Coast Brevard station and a Treasure Coast station. And then we own the passenger rights from Miami all the way up to Jacksonville. That's definitely part of the long-term plan. But, first things first, you got to get one system done before you can get the next. The good news is once you get one of these done and then you get Brightline West moving, these things all continue to move quicker and quicker, which is our hope. And what we think that we bring to the industry is that people are able to learn, and we're able to learn from the past experiences that we've had.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, and speaking of Brightline West, let's switch over to that coast. We have a couple of related questions. Roger asks, do you foresee connection to the California high-speed rail system? And Christopher asks, why not go all the way to LA Union Station?
Great question on both. So so California high-speed rail is a project. I mean, we're rooting for that project. Their plans ultimately call for a destination in Palmdale, California. And there is a current study going on for how to connect Palmdale into our Apple Valley station. So years away, but the idea would be for Brightline and California high-speed rail to connect in Palmdale. They would essentially serve as the north-south system, and we would serve as the east-west system. As to LA, there's a couple things. One, like I said earlier, there's not really a one major downtown for LA. There's population centers all over. Somewhere between 1 in every 19 people, end up in Riverside or San Bernardino County, 1 out of every 19 people in the country. So those population centers are enormous. The other thing is, one of the things that sets these projects back is perfection. And, sure, we'd love to go straight into LA, but that could take another 5+ years or more of development, planning, environmental permitting. And so we need to get these systems up now in order to show how we build more of them in the future. Plus, we have a really good partner in California Metrolink, and you'll be able to get there in about 40 to 50 minutes of additional time. It's 2 seats, but we'll add ridership to California MetroLink. They'll add ridership to us. And what we want to see is as many trains as possible coming into our station in Rancho Cucamonga.
So there's the integrated network approach, connections.
Right. And like there was so much interest in expansion and new service in Florida. Several people have asked about the possibility of Brightline expanding to other parts of the country. So I guess let's ask that all together. Our board member, another board member, Bill Porter, asks, is Brightline considering service outside those corridors, Midwest perhaps? Someone asks, when you all come into Texas? Lots of interest elsewhere.
Yeah, we talked a lot about this yesterday. This was a big question when we opened our Orlando station. We talked about it a lot. We think that there's about 10 to 12, maybe even 15 corridors in the country that make a lot of sense. The Texas Triangle, is kind of the holy grail that I think we all are looking at. So Austin, Houston, Dallas, and even something to San Antonio, Atlanta to Charlotte. There's Midwest considerations between Chicago and Minneapolis, or Chicago, Indianapolis, Columbus, Chicago, St. Louis, Portland to, Seattle to Vancouver, even Las Vegas to Phoenix, and then LA to San Diego. Those are some of the ones that we think are attractive. Again, this is kind of the headline from everything that we're talking about, is when Brightline West is under development and people see the way in which we've been able to do it, which is much quicker than what we were able to do in Florida, we're going to be able to show the world the blueprint for how to get this done. Ultimately, what we would like to see are the states and the state governments, which really have the superpower to permit these projects, to begin permitting these rights of way on the highway systems, and then get that done, take them out to bid to private companies like ours. That way, in 5 or 10 years, you end up having 10 of these being built simultaneously rather than one chronologically after the other. So the states, what we would like to see is for them to step into this game, find the best highway system that connects those cities, and then permit them in order to get them ready for build. Another reason we think that's important, we've spent more than $600 million of private capital to get Brightline West to construction readiness. That's a lot of dollars. And a lot of that was put into engineering, design, but also a lot into the permitting process. And so that's certainly a way, that's a big barrier for private entities to come into the industry. So we need to see the state governments, make a move on this in order to help get more of these built quickly.
Okay, great. Since you mentioned dollars, we've got a couple of questions about financing. Gary asks, it sounds like you've got a prospective investor here. Gary asks, can an individual buy into the private activity bonds that you mentioned? I would like to invest.
Yeah, those are typically sold to large banking institutions, but I'm sure if you're, I don't know that we have any individuals, but we certainly have, I think Nuveen is our largest bond holder. Other companies, that you're familiar with from the banking side, but we are not a public company yet. So.
Okay. Roger asks, is Brightline profitable?
So in the month of March, we had our most successful month between our South Florida cities. And operationally, it was profitable for the first time, which is incredible. That was never intended. Miami to West Palm Beach was really a prototype to kind of generate demand and to introduce the system and to see how it works and to get people out of their cars. We will be profitable when we get to Orlando. What you see all across the world are profitable systems when you consider the city pairs in which they're connecting. And all of those characteristics share kind of the same thing, which is a congested area with no other forms or alternatives for transportation in the works. Orlando to Miami makes sense. It's sandwiched in between the Everglades and the Atlantic Ocean. You can't continue to build highway systems there. A high-speed rail system makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I think that there's probably no better example than Las Vegas to Los Angeles. If you look at systems across the world, you got Paris to London, you got the Italian systems and the Spanish systems and all of those connectivities, when you look at the proper city pairs, they're highly profitable and they have a strong ridership base. And so that's the model that we're finding, and that's the model that we're trying to mimic here in the United States.
Great, thanks. You got to part of a question already from Vincent about financing sources for Brightline, but he had also asked, is your economic model based on fare revenue, or can you say more about the economic expectations here?
Yep, largely fare box, but we also own the trains, the stations, the land. There is real estate development opportunities around some of the land that I was talking about with Brightline West. We did the same thing in South Florida. I mean, we created about 1.5 million square feet of real estate in both West Palm Beach as well as Miami. But that's just an added benefit. That's not going to get you back your $6 billion investment, but it's a big piece of it. But we look at revenue through sponsorships, partnerships, and fare box are the primary drivers of revenue as we build these systems out.
Okay, great. Let's see. We have you mentioned safety issues, and we have a few questions about those. So let's go back. Maurice Ball, our board president, asks if you can comment on the number of train crossing accidents and how those numbers are being mitigated. I know that you made some comments about safety improvements at the railroad crossings, but I think we had an internet hiccup there for a few seconds.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so go to brightlinesafety.com. You can see a lot of the mitigation measures that we're putting in place. You can also sign our digital pledge if you haven't done so today. I think the way that I like to answer this question is in two parts. First, trains are safe, and we're introducing the safest form of transportation to Florida and between Las Vegas and Los Angeles in the world. I mean, there's not really a safer form of transportation than train travel. So trains are safe, and we're going to move millions of people off dangerous roadways and into our coaches, which is important and critical. The way in which safety, works is that it's a community-wide effort. And it is drastically impacted by the way in which pedestrians and motorists interact with the railroad. The incidents that we've seen in South Florida have all been through the scenario of somebody circumventing the safety equipment designed to protect them. So motorists driving around crossing gates, pedestrians trying to beat the train. Those are and then certainly suicide has been a big piece of that. We've spent a tremendous amount of money on safety. If you look at the construction and the infrastructure, we've spent almost $600 million to improve the crossings and the safety along the system. We've also invested, millions and millions of dollars on additional mitigation measures, from fencing and landscaping, additional medians so that motorists can't drive around the gates. Last year, we partnered with Florida Department of Transportation and applied for what they call a RAISE grant, and we were awarded a $25 million federal grant, which we'll probably begin construction on later this year, for additional fencing, delineators at crossings, and those things. So it's not one of these cliches or talking points to say that it's our top priority. We wake up every day thinking about it, and we go to bed every night dreaming about what are ways in which we can make this safer for motorists and pedestrians. But the other factor is we do need people to obey the law, and that's a key thing. Regardless of where you are in the railroad industry, is just making sure that people are following the law.
Okay. A couple of related questions about safety from Enrico. If you could do it all over, or apply what you've learned so far, or what's been learned so far about safety to future projects, is there anything that you might change or do differently, like considering elevated or grade separated system, have there been lessons that might be helpful for the future?
We operate and we engage with the Federal Railroad Administration. We meet and in most cases exceed the requirements from them as it relates to building and operating a train system. None of these incidents have been the fault of Brightline. And so, from that perspective, no. But, I think we built a system that we know is safe, that we know works, and it's improving as it relates to the safety impacts from the community. So we're going to continue to work on education, enforcement, as well as engineering solutions to protect the corridor and to prevent those from driving around gates and doing illegal activities. We're going to try to work as best we can to continue to put measures in place.
Okay, thanks. Let's switch from safety to food and beverage. There's been a lot of controversy over Amtrak's food and beverage service, and Kirk asks, is your food and beverage service profitable?
I'm going to say that the food and beverage stuff is profitable. It's hard to run a bar in this country and not be profitable, but I think what sets us apart is the thought and the meticulous detail that goes into our station experience. And that's very highly focused on food and beverage. And so, we're working with a variety of partners to make sure from a premium standpoint, it matches up with the price point of the ticketing. And then, just from our standard guest tickets, that they have access to anything and everything that they need. You saw in the Orlando station video, we have a signature bar called Mary Mary. That has been highly successful. It's been something that people and guests love. And it does everything from serve you coffee and breakfast in the morning to serving you cocktails during happy hour. Also, funny story behind that, we are the legacy company of Henry Flagler here in the state of Florida, who built the original railroad tracks. He had 3 wives, none at the same time. There could have been some overlap, but that bar is named after 2 of his wives who were both named Mary, and that's our historical nod to him and his family. So, but yeah, food and beverage is highly successful, and we have a great team that puts that together.
I'm glad that you got to Mary Mary, because when you showed that slide, there were a couple of questions that popped up right away about that. So thanks for clearing that up. Speaking of services, we had a question: is there checked baggage service available and any interline ticketing baggage service with the airlines?
Yeah, so we have a partner. So yes, when you walk into any of our stations, you can either check your luggage, or we have plenty of overhead space for guests to bring that on board. And then we will be partnering with Bags Inc. on a number of different things. And ultimately the hope, but with Brightline West, as well as Orlando, is that we'll be delivering your bags directly to your hotel room or your stateroom. And so that's part of the experience and the hospitality side of our business. So, that's a big thing. So when you check in Rancho Cucamonga and you're going to Las Vegas, your bags will show up at the Wynn Hotel if that's where you're staying. And so those are the things from a hospitality standpoint that we really hone in on and want to make a great experience.
And I was told when it was being promoted by the casino owner that you would also get your key when you checked in for the train.
That's the plan for Brightline West.
Okay. So you never even have to go to a hotel room, you go straight to gambling.
If you want to go straight to a show or to a casino, we're going to make that possible for you.
Excellent. Anything
Great.
else, Chris?
Yeah, there are many. I'll keep going unless we need to. I'll keep going, but let me know when we need to wrap up, Rick. We have a couple of environmental questions, so let me bring up those together. Mary says she's very interested in renewable energy, solar, wind versus hydrogen, etc. Is the Brightline system powered by overhead power lines to avoid reliance on batteries?
So in Florida, we share a freight track, and so there's some limitations to what we can do there. Those are biodiesel trains, which are clearly more environmental friendly than driving or flying. With Brightline West, that'll be a full electric system with a catenary system. That's how that will work. Projections show that we'll eliminate about 16,000 air flights, short haul air flights, and then remove millions of cars off the road. So, that's going to be the greenest form of transportation in the United States. And so we're excited about that. Some of those details, we're still going to continue to work through as we build the system, but that's where it stands today. And I did see one question about wildlife crossings. I think this is something we're particularly proud of is, we were engaged by an environmental coalition as well as Senators Feinstein and Padilla asking if we would consider building wildlife overpasses over the 15 and our railroad track, primarily for bighorn sheep. And we partnered with Caltrans and California Department of Fish and Wildlife and put together an agreement so that there will be 3 wildlife overpasses built between Apple Valley and the Nevada-California state line. So we're mission driven and we really want to be good friends, partners, and neighbors. And so that was important to us.
Okay. Susan asks about the draining of a swamp for the rail yard. Are you part of a wetland mitigation plan?
It's a good question. It was, this was an area that had been kind of left from the Orlando International Airport. And so there were plans there for 20 years to help develop this. And so, we went through extensive studies on the environmental side before greenlighting the Orlando construction. And then we did everything, even from a meticulous standpoint of moving hundreds of desert tortoises to safe locations. Even though the railroad track had been there for 100+ years, we did everything from, wildlife mitigations to waterway mitigations. And so, nothing was harmed in the development of that area. And we tend to leave things better than the way in which we found it.
Great. One more environmental question. Barry says, Brightline West purchased the environmental documents and permit from a private company that invested in the environmental review. Can other private companies and consulting firms invest in corridor planning rather than wait for public agencies?
That's a good question. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know the specific answer to that. I do know that, that record of decision was made in 2011. We did spend considerable time updating that. So it wasn't like we just took it and ran with it. Part of the last 3.5 years was to update that and then to begin new environmental processes from Victorville and Apple Valley into Rancho Cucamonga. So we did both.
Okay, great. And you mentioned the touchless aspect of your stations and service. We had a maybe related question about HVAC systems in the in the context of COVID, I guess. Can you say more about the HVAC?
Probably not with any considerable expertise or detail. But if you want, you can email me and I can see if I can find an answer for that.
Okay, thanks. And speaking of email, we had a question about whether we'll make the recording of this available online. Yes, we'll have that ready within a few days on our website, highspeedrail.us. We have, unless Rick, you want to make a comment, we do have more questions. We have a couple of related ones, so let me put these together. How would you describe your relationship with Amtrak? A couple of the possible future expansions rather that you mentioned might compete with Amtrak service. So there's some interest there from a couple of our questioners.
I don't think any of us in this industry in the United States can afford or are looking to compete with one another. I think it's all rooting for one another to get these systems done. And I think each system, California High Speed, Amtrak, and Brightline, shows that there's multiple models necessary and applicable in order to get high-speed rail built. So, we have the private model with our business thesis of building within a transportation network. You have a state system with California High-Speed Rail, and then you have the Amtrak system. And I think all of these need to be successful. And so I think we're looking at each other and seeing what can we all learn from one another in order to do this right and to get this done quicker. So I know that we engage with Amtrak at a variety of levels. Same thing with California High-Speed Rail. Our team is meeting with California High-Speed Rail routinely to ensure that when those systems do connect, they're interoperable. And with Amtrak, I think it's a matter of learning and understanding how they do things and how we do things. So there's just a lot of connectivity because there's not a lot of people doing this in the industry.
I want to build on the connection to California high-speed rail, because I was told once that there is a big market of travel between the Central Valley and Las Vegas. So what I've been saying for a long time is if you can get Brightline West started in the Central Valley going, then now all of a sudden it becomes much easier to justify at least the Tehachapi crossing. And then once you get across the Tehechapis, at least you've got Metrolink to get from Palmdale down to LA. Is there that market, and does that kind of philosophy make sense?
I haven't studied the ridership numbers that California High Speed Rail is looking at. I'm obviously familiar with what they're doing and we engage with them often, but I think that that's the long-term plan, right? I mean, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And that's why there's studies already underway to connect to Palmdale's, because, you know, we want these systems to be connected. That's the way that they work in Europe. That's the way that they work in Asia. And so, you know, for us, it just makes tremendous amount of sense. And I think for California High Speed Rail, they would say the same thing.
And then I've got one question, and then Chris, are there any that are really pressing that?
I think, you know, given the time, we're just, you know, it's hopeless. There's so many questions that we won't be able to get to. So why don't you just bring us home, Rick?
So one thing that's very different with Brightline is the security check as you're going in, which is not a TSA check, and it's nothing like a TSA check. But can you tell me more about the philosophy around that and why it's there?
Yep. We're the only passenger rail system in the country that screens their passengers and screens their bags. We have a manifest, no different than an airline. So, you know, we know the names of people on board. And that's all primarily for safety and security purposes. We want the system to be as safe as possible. And so we have what we call what we would look at as the equivalent of what we all go through at airports. However, the big difference is that you're not waiting in a line. It's a very quick throughput, and you're walking through detectors versus stopping, waiting to be told to go through. We can easily move 400 people through that system in a matter of minutes in order to get on a 30-minute, 60-minute, or 3-hour train ride. So we do think it's important. This is a transportation asset, and those things are security issues. And so we want to make sure that our passengers and our system is as safe as possible.
I will add so from the pictures that I saw of your station opening, the metal detectors look like what I went through at Staten Island to get on the Staten Island ferry. So I guess it's not totally unique.
Yeah, maybe it's changing.
Yeah. Barring any pressing issues, this has been really good. I really appreciate you coming, Ben. Really excited about riding that train sometime in the summer. Tell us when that first train is, and we'll be there. And again, to everybody who's joined us today, thank you very much for your interest. We're working together to ensure that states are, in fact, creating state programs that can go out and acquire that right of way and do all the pre-work so that we can make these things happen. And if you liked this program, if you want to see more, highspeedrail.us and hit that donate button. And always feel free to call us. So thank you all for coming, and thanks, Ben, for being here.